With the winter fast approaching and the ongoing energy crisis worsening due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, the UK government is now looking at other alternative sources of energy for home heating.
And Nigel is going to come to your house and he's going to pay your energy bills and those of everyone who live on your street for an entire year. Go to the website that we're launching this morning, www.nigelcutmybills.com. You'll see our plan to bring down people's bills there. How we're going to...
Nigel Farage and the Great Energy Bill Gamble. Is Reform UK saving households or playing politics? Let's be honest with each other. When a political party launches a website called nigelcutmybills.com and promises to show up at your door to pay your energy bills, your first instinct probably is not to reach for your wallet in gratitude. It is to raise an eyebrow so high it nearly leaves your face entirely. And yet, here we are. Britain in 2025, with oil prices surging, the Strait of Hormuz under blockade, and Nigel Farage staging what can only be described as the most theatrical energy policy announcement this side of a game show. Welcome to British Energy, the channel where we cut through the noise, follow the money, and tell you exactly what is going on in the corridors and car parks of British political power. If you have not already subscribed to British Energy, please do it now. It costs you nothing, and it keeps this channel alive so we can keep doing exactly this kind of work for you. Right, let us get into it because this story is far more layered than it first appears. On Tuesday morning, Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage and the party's economic spokesman Robert Jenrick stood before cameras and announced what they are calling a plan to cut annual household energy bills by £200. The headline policy is relatively straightforward. Scrapping VAT on energy bills would save the average household £85. Lifting green levies would bring costs down by a further £115. Simple arithmetic, bold promise. But here's where it gets interesting, because Reform did not stop at policy. They launched a prize draw. Yes, a prize draw. Enter your details at nigelcutmybills.com and you could win an entire year of energy bills paid, not just for you, but for every single household on your street. Farage himself apparently will show up and foot the bill. The maximum value per property is capped at £3,500, and the terms clarify that the cost covered will be based on the previous 12 months of billing, meaning winners will not be shielded from the spike in prices caused by the Iran conflict. But still, as gestures go, it is a dramatic one. Now, before you dismiss this entirely, let us put the energy crisis in proper context because it is real and it is serious, and any honest discussion of Reform's announcement has to begin there. Britain finds itself in a deeply uncomfortable position right now. Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil and gas cargo passes, has sent wholesale energy prices surging. This is not a domestic policy failure in isolation. This is global geopolitics landing directly on the kitchen tables of British households. The energy price cap, which the government has used as a blunt instrument to manage consumer exposure to these swings, is set to reduce the average bill by £150 between April and July. That's welcome, of course, but it's a temporary cushion against what is increasingly looking like a structural problem. And this is precisely the crack that Reform is trying to wedge itself into. Robert Jenrick made the case with practiced precision. He described the prize draw as a small down payment on what Reform wants to do, and the language there is important. Down payment implies there is more to come. It implies a plan. Reform's broader argument rests on two pillars. First, that the net zero agenda, which both Labour and the Conservatives have backed across successive governments, has loaded costs on British households that they simply cannot afford. Second, that Brexit, long a source of economic controversy and division, offers a specific and tangible benefit here, namely the ability to cut VAT on domestic energy bills, which EU membership rules previously prohibited. Farage said it himself, with the kind of barely concealed satisfaction he has been perfecting for 30 years. Listen in, Rachel Reeves. We can only cut that 5% VAT on domestic heating bills because we are not members of the European Union. Now that is factually accurate. EU state aid and tax harmonization rules did constrain the UK's flexibility on VAT while it remained a member, and it is worth noting, with some irony, that Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves themselves supported cutting VAT on energy bills for 1 year as an emergency measure back in 2022 when they were in opposition and it was politically convenient to do so. They have not rushed to implement it since taking office. That inconsistency is exactly the kind of thing Reform is built to exploit. This is a good moment to remind you, if you are finding this analysis useful, that this is what British Energy does every single week. We track these stories, we follow the threads, we ask the uncomfortable questions. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because the conversations we are having here are only going to get more important as Britain heads toward the next general election. Back to the prize draw, because we cannot let that slide with scrutiny. The reaction from Labour and the Liberal Democrats was immediate and fairly predictable, though not entirely wrong. Luke Charters, the Labour MP for York Outer, pointed out that entering the draw requires handing over personal details, and asked pointedly what Reform intends to do with that data. Anna Turley, Labour's party chairman, redirected attention to the energy price cap reduction coming in April. James McCleary of the Liberal Democrats went further, calling the stunt the kind of behavior at home in corrupt regimes rather than Britain. That last comment is probably an overreach. Prize draws are legal, political parties run promotional events, but the data point is a legitimate one. Reform raised £5.5 million in the final quarter of last year, and last week they were already handing out cut-price fuel at a petrol station in Derbyshire. These are not random acts of generosity. They are calculated exercises in brand building, voter engagement, and yes, data collection. Understanding who is interested in Reform's messaging is enormously valuable for a party that is trying to turn protest votes into a genuine electoral coalition. Reform insists none of this breaches electoral law, and legally they are likely right. But the optics deserve scrutiny all the same. Now let us look at the broader energy policy landscape Reform's operating in, because the numbers matter. Forecasts show that net zero levies on household electricity bills are expected to rise significantly across this decade. Renewables obligations, feed-in tariffs, contracts for difference, contributions towards Sizewell C and carbon capture projects, these costs are all embedded in what you pay every month. For a standard household using around 3,100 kilowatt hours per year, the trajectory of these policy costs points consistently upward. Reform's pledge to abolish all green and clean power targets, including the legally binding commitment for the UK to reach net zero by 2050, would, if implemented, reduce some of those levies. Whether it would reduce them as dramatically as Reform claims, and what the long-term economic and environmental costs of abandoning net zero would be, is a rather larger debate than one press conference can settle. What is clear is that Reform has identified a genuine fault line in British politics. The cost of the energy transition is real, it is landing on real households, and neither Labour nor the Conservatives have managed to explain it to the public in a way that feels honest or adequate. Into that vacuum walks Farage, with a prize draw and a website, and millions of people wondering how they are going to pay their bills. The question you have to ask yourself, and this is the question British politics will be wrestling with for years, is whether cutting green levies now solves the problem or simply defers a far more expensive reckoning to a later generation. That is not a rhetorical question. It is the central tension of energy policy in this country, and it deserves a serious answer that no party has yet fully provided. Britain is at a crossroads. The Iran crisis has reminded everyone how exposed this country still is to the volatility of global fossil fuel markets. The net zero transition, for all its costs, is partly a bet on energy independence through renewables. Reform's answer is to cut those transition costs and return to a model that leaves Britain vulnerable to exactly the kind of shock we are experiencing right now. Labour's answer is to press ahead with the transition while managing short-term pain. Neither position is cost-free. Both carry risk. This is the story of British energy, and it is not going away. If anything, it's just getting started. Stay with us because we are going to keep watching every move, every announcement, every policy shift that affects what you pay, who benefits, and who is actually telling you the truth. Take a breath, stay informed, and please, if this kind of journalism matters to you, subscribe to British Energy. It genuinely helps this channel grow so we can keep delivering exactly this, week after week. We'll see you in the next one.